Hello YouTube, this is Corey Newman. I'm going to begin a series of videos on the history of Hartshorne Woods in Highlands, New Jersey. This first part is going to be on the history of Hartshorne Woods during the Colonial Period from 1660 to 1776. I'm going to do a reading of my notes. Before the European explorers and colonists came to the New World, the land of Rocky Point was inhabited by local Lenape Indians. The explorer Governor de Verrazano, 1485 to 1528, briefly came to Sandy Hook Bay in the Narrows, which bears his name, in 1524. Henry Hudson visited Sandy Hook Bay in the Navesink of Highlands in September 1609. Historically, the land of New Jersey was part of the New Netherlands colony started in May 1626 by Director General of the Dutch West India Company, Peter Minuit, 1580 to 1638. He ruled the colony from 1626 to 1631. From there, the colony passed through several Dutch governors till September 1664, when Peter Stuyvesant signed a surrender treaty with the English, and Richard Nichols was declared governor. Earlier in 1664, Charles II of England granted his brother James II, then Duke of York, land that encompassed the Dutch colony. 4 English frigates sailed into New Amsterdam and demanded the surrender of the colony at the end of August 1664. Formal European settlement of what today is Monmouth County did not begin until after the English conquest of New Netherlands in 1664. Interestingly, prior to the conquest, it appears that English colonists from Long Island were covetous of lands in Monmouth County and had begun exploring this area with an eye toward settlement. In 1663, a group of potential settlers from Gravesend, Long Island, attempted to purchase land in Monmouth County, but were stopped by the Dutch. There is evidence that these potential English settlers were aware of the planned conquest, as reflected in the statement they made that the king's patent is quite another caste. Excuse my cold. Apparently made when the Long Island interlopers were intercepted by a Dutch vessel. Settlement of what was then known as the Monmouth Patent began immediately after the English conquest of New Netherlands. On April 8, 1665, Governor Richard Nichols conveyed the Monmouth or Navesink Patent to some of the inhabitants of Gravesend upon Long Island. The region's earliest settlers were transplanted New Englanders from both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, many of whom had been residents on Long Island. Many were Quakers, though others were Baptists. The patentees were to erect and build towns and villages, with each original patentee receiving 500 acres and an additional 120 acres for each family member, and 60 acres for each servant. The area's proximity to New York Harbor and its geography, sheltered by Sandy Hook and the Highlands, the Navesink estuary, gave access to large stands of timber and good agricultural soil, made the region highly attractive to settlers. It appears that the initial nucleated settlement was replaced by moderately sized lots along the Navesink River that were later consolidated by the Hartshorne families into larger tracts. Thus, while the name Portland was specifically used for an early community established in December 1667 along the south shore of Sandy Hook Bay, the name soon became more generally applied to a broad stretch of land encompassing most of the Navesink Highlands. As early as June 1667, a local assembly in the Highlands was talking of seeking independence in 1668. In 1668, deputies from the towns of Middletown and Shrewsbury refused to take oaths to the Colonial Assembly, while residents of the town refused to pay taxes or publish colonial ordinances. While the colonies in New York, New Jersey, and the villages of Middletown and Portland were growing in the late 1600s, there was concern for the defense of the harbor of New York. With the threat of war looming in Europe in 1687, local merchants were worried and met with the governor. On February 22, 1687, for example, as a result of a number of questions put to him by a board of trade, Governor Thomas Dongan of New York reported at length on the state of that province. In his request, Dongan offered a plan that would provide a measure of defense for New York City and asked for an order to make up a small fort with 12 guns upon the Sandy Hook Channel, there being so near the shore that no vessel can go in or out, but she must come so near the point that from on board one might toss a biscuit cake on shore. 2 years later, another request for protection of the city stemmed from the struggle between various European powers and Louis XIV of France. Great Britain and her colonies stood against France and her Indian allies in the New World. The extension of this war in Europe that touched America was called King William's War, 1689 to 1697. The next war to involve the colonies in 1700 was Queen Anne's War, 1702 to 1713. During this war, New York Harbor and outlying areas were subject to raids by the French. In one infamous episode, a French privateer plundered ships for weeks along the Jersey shore. In June 1704, an English merchantman sailing from Antigua was seized by a French warship of 14 guns under the command of Captain Davy in Delaware Bay. Davy then proceeded up the Jersey shore, chasing another ship toward Sandy Hook. When no further prizes were found, the French instead landed 24 men below the Navesink River and proceeded to burn 2 homes to the ground. The incident threatened to place not only the shipping off New Jersey, but also its coastal settlements on the front line of Queen Anne's War. Residents of this county established a watch system that was tasked with preventing further raids. Yet the assaults on shipping continued. On June 27th, a French privateer engaged another English vessel that had sailed to America from London. The new merchantman attempted to avoid capture by beaching itself on Sandy Hook. However, when this maneuver failed, the captain and his crew, including Philip French, the former mayor of New York City, abandoned the ship and fled. They rowed to the Jersey shore and were rescued by local militia. On July 25, 1704, for example, a French privateer, having overtaken several sloops, anchored at Sandy Hook, where she continues her depredations against local settlers. As a result of that raid, Edward Lord Cornbury, our Captain General and Governor-in-Chief in New Jersey, pressed for a law to fix a watch house on the Navesink Hills. Governor Cornbury called an assembly together in 1704 to request funds for the construction of a watchtower on the Highlands with enough militia to patrol the area. Despite weeks of debate, the bill was delayed and the Jersey shore continued to be a theater of war. The next summer, another French privateer, perhaps Davy, again raided the waters off Sandy Hook, capturing a ship bound for Jamaica. A French raiding party again was landed south of Navesink and burned more homes to the ground. 4 American boats loaded with 350 men were again dispatched to the region, though much as in 1704 they failed to encounter the nimble Frenchmen. In 1711, the New York Colonial General Assembly passed an act for the security and defense of this colony during the expedition to Canada. It was proposed to erect a series of beacons on Long Island in New Jersey to forewarn New York of an approach of enemy ships. There were to be at least 3 men stationed at each beacon on Long Island and New Jersey. There were 2 proposed beacons at the Jersey shore, one at ye Highlands of Neversinks, and another at ye inside of Sandy Hook that may be seen from thence, at each of which there ought to be fired off at the time for each beacon. The 1710-1720 Hartshorne Survey notes that the Eastern Highlands parcel, which included lands that became the Navesink Military Reservation, as William Hartshorne's land, within the fence containing 812 and 8/10 acres. A sketch of the southwest corner of this parcel shows the William Hartshorne House, which became known as Portland. On the highlands in the northeast area of this parcel, a conical structure noted as a beacon suggests that by at least 1720, colonists were using the elevation of the highlands as a site for a navigation marker or signal. In the 1740s, during the War of Austrian Succession, colonists devised a signaling system on the highlands with an oil fire at night and a raised ball during the day to signal the approach of enemy French ships. Once again, the colony's coastal location quickly invited attacks by privateers. Spanish warships soon appeared off Sandy Hook and in the Delaware Bay. In May 1740 alone, 3 Spanish ships began seizing prizes off the coast. It appears that this beacon burned down by September 1746 and was not even noticed by the city of New York. The fire, it seems, went completely unnoticed in New York and demonstrated an apparent weakness in this type of warning system. At the height of the conflict, the signal beacon that had been constructed atop the highlands during the Queen Anne's War accidentally burned to the ground. Despite the design of the structure to warn New York City of approaching privateers by signal fire, no one on the island of Manhattan reportedly noticed the burning tower, perhaps a testament to its uselessness. Shortly after the time of the Monmouth Patent in the mid-1660s to the 1680s, the land was purchased by Richard Hartshorne from local Indians, and he purchased a house from an earlier settler named John Hawes on the current site of Portland Place in Middletown for 350 guilders. Richard Hartshorne, the first to locate in Monmouth County, was born on October 24, 1641, at Hartshorne in Leicestershire, England. He was a son of William Hartshorne and a brother of Hugh Hartshorne, 1629 to 1684. The latter a London upholsterer and proprietor of the Providence of East Jersey. Richard Hartshorne, a Quaker, came to America from London in September of 1669, apparently first settling in Rhode Island. On April 27, 1670, he was married at Newport to Margaret Carr, daughter of Robert Carr. But early on, his interest began to focus on Monmouth County. In February 18, 1669, Hartshorne agreed to purchase a cleared and partially fenced property at Waykay Creek on the bay shore from John Hawes. This land included a house then under construction. A final agreement dated February 27th included specifications for finishing the house. After relocating to Middletown, Hartshorne quickly acquired considerable land by patent and purchasing. He became a Monmouth patentee in 1670 by acquiring William Golding's share and an East Jersey proprietor like his brother Hugh. Among Hartshorne's holdings were Sandy Hook and a large tract at the Highlands that encompass everything east of Atlantic Highlands from Bayshore to the Navesink River. This large estate became known as Portland Point, or simply Portland. It served as the seat of the Hartshorne family until 1952. The area he settled in was known as Waykay Creek. The area of Rocky Point was then known as Portland Point. Portland Point was the name given to one of the first settlements in Navesink, established in the 1660s. Thus, while the name Portland was specifically used for an early community established in 1667 along the south side of Sandy Hook Bay, the name became more generally applied to a broad stretch of land encompassing most of Navesink Highlands. In 1685, William Lawrence, Richard Hartshorne, John and Joseph West, Edward Lafitera, and others took up 2,500 acres of land on the coast from Wreck Pond to the head of Barnegat Bay, under the name of the Manasquan Beach Company. Their lands were in several cases occupied many years by their descendants of the original purchasers, and others were sold soon afterwards. Richard Hartshorne, of whom much is said in connection with Waykay in Raritan Township and the Highlands of Navesink, bought considerable land on both sides of the King's Highway in Middletown, New Jersey, before 1699. Richard Hartshorne held many positions in early Monmouth County history. He held many positions of responsibility as the town constable, town clerk, justice, member of the Provincial Assembly representing Middletown, Speaker of the Assembly, member of the Provincial Council, and judge of the Court of Common Right in Perth Amboy. He continued to purchase much of the surrounding land during this time till the end of the century, and consolidating it with his land holdings to own all of Sandy Hook in what is now the town of Highlands and parts of Middletown, New Jersey. His land holdings were passed down to his children. In 1703, Richard gave his son, William Hartshorne, 1678 to 1748, the Highlands estate in Sandy Hook. The first lawyer of Monmouth County was Richard Hartshorne. It is not known that he had been educated to the profession in England, but it is certain that he was an attorney after he came to the residence in Highlands, in Monmouth, and also that he became a man of extensive influence and filled many honorable positions, among that which of commissar, which he was appointed in 1676, to adjust and decide some matters of difference between two provinces in New Jersey. Richard Hartshorne was 63 at the time when he gave his land to his son William and retired from public life in 1706. He died in Middletown in 1722. William Hartshorne was born on the 22nd of the first month In other words, January either 1678 or 1679. He was son of Richard Hartshorne and Margaret Carr. He died on February 29th, 1748 or 1749, at the age of 68. He was married first to Catherine, daughter of John Bound. His second wife he married on May 1st, 1713, to Helena Willett, 1680 to 1715, of Flushing, Long Island. His third wife was Elizabeth Lawrence, 1690 to 1750. He had a daughter, who is the daughter of William Lawrence and Ruth Gibbons. Hartshorne had 3 children by his first wife, 2 children by his second wife, and 7 children by his third wife. He succeeded his father as owner of Portland and Sandy Hook. Hartshorne served as a justice and was socially and politically prominent in Monmouth County. In 1710, he built a committee to build a new jail in Middletown. In 1738, William conveyed the property to his son Thomas Hartshorne, 1715 to 1747. Where William executed his will in 1745, it was stipulated that his executors sell the land he was currently dwelling in, as well as additional adjoining property. His executors were Thomas Hugh and Robert Hartshorne. The heirs of William Hartshorne attempted to sell the estate in 1748, 1752, and again in 1754 without success. The brother of Esek Hartshorne, 1728 to 1795, was Robert Hartshorne, 1721 to 1805. Esek sold 747 acres to his brother in 1762. After William Hartshorne's death in 1748, his son Robert Hartshorne, 1721 to 1805, and Esek Hartshorne, 1728 to 1795, tried to sell their father's approximately 800 acres Sandy Hook land and his 1,529-acre Highlands properties. Instead, they divided the Portland tract in 1761 into 2 equal estates of 764.5 acres with shared interest in Sandy Hook, as noted in a 1761 survey. In 1762, they sold 4 acres of the northern tip of Sandy Hook to a group of New York merchants who, in 1764, erected the Sandy Hook Lighthouse, now the oldest lighthouse in the U.S. The brothers retained joint ownership of the rest of Sandy Hook and divided the highlands between them, with Robert taking the southern Navesink River portion, which included the land that became the reservation, Navesink Military Reservation, along with the Hartshorne House, known as Portland, and Esek taking the northern Bayshore portion. Robert held on to his portion of the property until his death in 1801. The land then passed to Robert's son Richard Hartshorne, 1738 to 1831. Rocky Point was then passed to his son Robert Hartshorne, 1798 to 1782. Well, I hope you liked that history of Hartshorne Woods. Just my initial notes and thoughts on this history. Interesting history in and of itself. So if you like that, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'd like to grow my channel. And see you in the next installment of History of Hartshorne Woods. Bye.